In this tutorial, we're going to demonstrate how we can create toolpaths in Design Make Machinist or Cut3D and import them into Cut2D Pro or Desktop. We can then incorporate them into our design, and in this example, we're going to create a very basic house sign. But to get started, let's head over to designandmake.com. Okay, so to get started, we're going to head over to designandmake.com. And once you're there, you're just going to scroll down until you get to this section here that says software. So we're just going to click on that. And this will take you to this page here, which has a little bit of information on how the software actually works. And you can see you've got a download link here to get your free copy of Design and Make Machinist, as well as a link here to get some free content to get you started with Design and Make Machinist. There's also some tutorial videos here to help you get started with Design and Make, but we won't be going into too much detail in this video. But if you do want to learn more about Design and Make, please do have a look at some of these tutorial videos. They are really, really helpful. Now, if you did want to take a look at some of the free content, you can just click on this link just here, and you'll see it'll bring you to a page with some free featured items. And to actually download these, you'll need to make sure that you actually have a Design and Make account. And to do that, you just simply come up to the top right here, click on account, and you can click sign up to get yourself an account and to get started with some free content. Now, while you're on Design and Make, you also have access to our full store. And to get to the full store, you can just go up to the top left here, click on shop, and you can click on individual models. And as you can see, we've now got a featured set of individual models that are the newest in. If I just click on these, for example, you can see that you can download any of these paid models when you set up an account and pay for these as well. So you can download these individual models in each variant. So you have a lot of choice here as to what you would like. And of course, you can import these into your Design and Make software, so you can then cut them out on your machine using some toolpaths that you design within the software itself. Okay, so once you've actually downloaded and installed Design and Make Machinist, you can just double click on the icon on your desktop and it'll open up the software as we have here. And you'll notice that Design and Make Machinist is set up to follow 7 easy steps. So you can just follow from importing your design to creating toolpaths all the way to saving out your design so you can run it on your CNC. Now, in our demonstration, we're going to take a look at some toolpaths and not run them directly on our CNC machine. What we're actually going to do is import these into Cut2D and use them in conjunction with some of the features of Cut2D. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load in a model. So if we come up to load a 3D model and click on that, you'll notice that I've got this file here, which is a fleur-de-lis. Now, Design and Make have kindly supplied this file to us, but this is not actually free on the website itself, but you will get this with this tutorial to use so you can follow along yourself. So let's just double click on that and bring that in to our software. Now, I've already taken the time to set up the toolpaths in Design and Make Machinist so we can make this go a little bit faster. But if you would like to go through all the steps one at a time, I highly suggest that you go to designandmake.com to watch the video on designandmake.com to see how you can go through this step by step to create some toolpaths for some 3D models that you can import yourself. Now, as you can see, we've got our form open here, and you can see that we can flip our models left to right on our x-axis and top to bottom on our y-axis, or we can rotate them if we'd like as well. And we have other controls here so that you can pan or zoom on to your 3D content, and you can also choose the material that you would like your current project to look like. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose pine for the moment. I'm quite happy with how this looks, so I'm just going to go ahead and click next. Now, as mentioned earlier, I've already set this up with the proper dimensions that I want, but what you're going to be interested in or really need to pay attention to is that when you create your toolpath in Design and Make Machinist, that toolpath can't be sized in Cut2D. So these dimensions are important. So in our case, we knew the height needed to be 7 inches. The width was scaled automatically for us to 6.528 inches. In the depth, I decided it was going to be 0.35 inches. And our datum is set to the center. Our thickness actually doesn't matter here, but because we can actually change that in Cut2D. So that's one thing that we can change in our Cut2D software. Now we do want to have a slight gap above our model. So that way, if there's any imperfections in the top of our material, then we're going to go ahead and miss that and not have any flat spots on top of our model. And our units are, of course, set to inches as well. So we can go ahead and click next. Okay, so what we're presented with here is our roughing pass. And again, I've already set up the roughing pass toolpath ahead of time. You can see that with the blue toolpath that is following here on the actual model itself. And I've already set these settings to be correct for my machine, along with using the right tool, which is an M mill in this case. And I'm happy with that. So let's just click next. And now we're presented with our finishing pass, and this all looks correct as well. This has been set up previously by myself. So let's just click next. And I don't need a cutout toolpath because I'm not going to be cutting this out in the end. So again, I will just click next on this form. And finally, this is the preview we have. So we can actually preview this before we go ahead and cut it on the machine. Now, I think it's always a good idea to preview this. So let's preview our roughing toolpath. And there we go. You can see it's just run through the roughing toolpath there. And that is exactly what I expect to see, for it to get rid of the majority of the material. And then we'll preview our finishing toolpath, which will finish it up and give it a nice detail on the top there. And I think that looks pretty great. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and click next. Now at this stage, we can actually save our toolpaths. Now you have the option of saving these individually, or you can choose this option here, which is what we're going to do, which is to save a V3M for VCarve Pro or Cut2D. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to click on save, and I'm just going to call this Fleur A Toolpath TP. So that means it's the toolpath files, and then just go ahead and click save. Okay, so now that we've moved over to our software, we're going to go ahead and open a new file. So let's create a new file. And for this instance, I'm going to make sure that the job is a single-sided job with a width of 10 inches. And I want a height of 12 inches. And I want a thickness of 0.75. Of course, our units are set to inches. And we're going to Z0 off the material surface, and for this instance we're actually going to use the center as our XY datum position, but we will change that to the bottom left when it comes to tooling a little later on, but we can do that in the Toolpaths menu a little bit later. But for now, let's go ahead and click OK. Okay, so with our job sheet set up, we can now look at importing the file that we just saved off in Design and Make Machinist. So let's come up to the top here, and we're going to click on File, and we're going to go down to Import, and we're going to choose this option here, Import Photo VCarve Machinist or Cut3D Toolpaths. And I'm just going to navigate to my folder where I saved off my Design Make Machinist files. In this case, it's the tutorial folder for this specific tutorial. And I've got my Toolpath files here, so I'm going to click Open. And there we are. You'll notice that this is actually showing the toolpaths. If I just tile my views by clicking this button up here to vertically tile them, you'll notice on the left-hand side, we have the bitmap representation of the model we have. And this on the blue representation here is actually just the toolpath. So on the 3D view here, this isn't an actual bitmap. This is just a representation of the toolpaths that we saved earlier in Design and Make Machinist. Now what you'll notice is that you can actually click on your model here, and you can actually move this around, and it'll be moved around on the 3D view here as well. So your toolpaths will actually follow this around. So if you needed to place it in the top right, for example, you are more than welcome to do that. Quite a powerful tool we've got going on here, but for now I'm going to put this back in the center. Of course, you can also hit F9 on your keyboard to center your model again once you have it selected. But for right now, let's pop over to our Toolpaths tab, because I'm just going to show you that the toolpaths have actually been imported here. So you can see they've been imported. Let's just maximize our 3D view. And if you look here, if I turn off this toolpath here, you'll notice that this is just our roughing pass. So this is what our roughing pass looks like. And if I turn off our roughing pass and turn on our finishing pass, there we are. You can see what our finishing path looks like as well. But for now, we're going to pop back over to the drawing tab, because we're going to make some changes before we go ahead and toolpath this. So let's pop over to the drawing tab, and then let's rearrange our views again. Look down on that as well. And there we are. We're ready to now move on to the next part of this demonstration. So the next step is we're actually going to add an ellipse around our model so it can sit on top of that. So our fleur-de-lis will actually sit on top of this ellipse. So with that in mind, let's pop over to the drawing tab and select this tool here to draw an ellipse. Now anchor point is going to be in the middle. I'm just going to change the width to be 8 inches and I want the height to still be 10 inches. So let's hit create. And now you'll notice if we close out our form, we have this new ellipse here around our fleur-de-lis. Now we're going to use this new vector, this new ellipse that we've added as a profile cut when we come to cut out our sign. And also we will use it to define the space between our toolpath that we created in Design Make Machinist and the border of our sign. So we can machine out the extra material that's in between them in this space here, in this white space just here. Okay, so the next step is we're actually going to add some text to our design. Now you could use something like a house number, you could use something like a last name, but in our case we're actually going to use a number. I'm going to pop over to the draw text tool just here, and the number I'm going to use here is going to be 1862. Now in this case I want my font to be a true type font, and as for the text I would actually like to use trebuchet. Now I'm actually quite happy with how trebuchet looks, but of course for yourself, if you would like to use a different font, by all means give it a try. I'm sure that most fonts will work here, but just make sure that when you try it in new fonts that you test it out beforehand before you go to cut it, to make sure that it actually does Toolpath correctly before you go to cut it on your CNC machine. I don't want this to be bold or italic. I want it to be in the center of my job here. I want the text height to be 1.5, and as my anchor I want them to be at 0. So this will be right in the center, as you can see here, of the job, and I'm just going to go ahead and click close. Okay, so with that text in place, I'm now going to move it up a little bit so we can see it a bit better. So if you notice, I've clicked on it again. I've now got these anchor points that I can move it with. I'm going to click on the middle one here, and while holding Alt on the keyboard, I'm just going to hold down the mouse button and just drag it up to the top here and place it right about there. Now you'll notice that where I place my text is actually not enough room for it above the fleur-de-lis, so I'm actually going to need to move the fleur-de-lis down a little bit. So I could just drag this by clicking on it and moving it down using the anchor point, but in this case I actually know how much I want to move it down by precisely. So to do that, I've got it selected. I'm going to pop over to the Transform Objects part of the Drawing tab, and I'm going to click on this tool here, the Move Selected Objects tool. And I want it to be relative, so I'm going to move it relative to its anchor point here, and I'm going to move it -1 in Y. So -1, hit apply, and there you go, it's moved it down. I can hit apply, close that down, and you'll notice now that I can now move my text down and get the fleur-de-lis all within our sign. Now I can just select this text and just nudge it down using my cursor keys. So I can move that down like that using the down arrow on my keyboard, for example, but I actually want my text to sit on a bit of a curve, and to do that I can actually use this tool over here called Edit Text Spacing and Curve. And if I click on that, you'll notice I've got these two nodes here that I can now click on. And you'll notice that if I left click on the top one and drag it up, I can curve it that way. And similarly, if I click on the bottom one and hold down the mouse click and pull it down, you'll notice that I can now angle the numbers this way. But I actually want to angle them upwards, so I'm just going to curve them up. And what I'm actually looking for here is if you look at the top of the numbers that are going outside of our ellipse, I want the space or the amount of the letters that are going outside of the ellipse to be roughly even. So I'm happy about there, I think. And then what I'll do is I'll look at editing the space between each number as well, because I don't think the spacing is quite correct. Now you'll notice that if I hover my mouse pointer between each number, you have this little plus sign and you have two arrows pointing towards each other. Now if I click, just left click between them, you'll notice the numbers will move closer together, right? If I do the same between the 8 and the 6 and the 6 and the 2, you can see they're slowly moving closer together. Similarly, if I hold the shift key down and I click between numbers, so if I click between the 8 and the 6, if you pay close attention here, you'll notice that when I click, they move further apart, and that's by holding shift while clicking between them. But I'm just going to edit the spacing so I get them a little bit closer together until I'm quite happy with it. Just going to edit that, just a little bit more space between those two there. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and click on the selection mode again over under edit objects. Then we just click off that, click back onto our text, and we can just move that down by nudging it down with the down arrow on our keyboard there. And I'm actually quite happy with the placement being just about there. I'm actually quite happy with that. I think that looks very, very nice. Okay, so now that our design is ready to go, we can now have a look at toolpathing our project. So let's pop over to the Toolpath menu by clicking on this button just here. And we're going to go over to Material Setup and click on the Set button, because we want to make sure that our material setup in the software is the same as the setup of our physical CNC machine in the real world. So our thickness is still 0.75 inches, but we will change the XY datum to the bottom left-hand corner for machining purposes. Our Z0 is going to be off of the material surface. And you want to make sure that your rapid Z-gaps above material are safe and appropriate for your machine, and any hold downs that you may have on it. I'm just going to change this to values that are correct for my machine. I'm just going to change this to 0.25 here. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now you'll notice I've got a little bit of a nudge here from the software. And because I've changed the XY datum position, it's saying that I need to recalculate all the toolpaths because I've changed the XY datum position. So let's just go ahead and click yes. And now you'll notice I'm going to get another nudge, and I'm going to get another one after this as well, because it's saying that recalculation is not supported for imported toolpaths. But that's okay. We don't actually need to recalculate these toolpaths because the toolpaths haven't actually changed. We've made no changes to the toolpaths themselves. We're still going to be using a 3D roughing toolpath and a 3D finishing toolpath. So those haven't changed. So we can safely click OK on both of these subsequent warnings. Now we can have a look at previewing our toolpaths. So let's pop up to select our roughing toolpath and our finishing toolpath and click this button here to preview toolpaths, and we can click on preview all toolpaths. And there we are. That is what our finished design will look like, and I think that looks really, really nice. So let's just look back down on that. Now, if you recall earlier, I said that we're going to be using the ellipse vector here and the boundary of our toolpath to actually create a pocket, to pocket out this extra material just here. So we're going to go ahead and look at doing that now. So let's just close down our preview. So let's come over and select our fleur-de-lis. Holding down Shift, I'm also going to select the ellipse, and I'm actually going to choose this option here to create a pocket toolpath. Now the start depth will be 0, but our actual cut depth will go down to 0.4. Now if you remember when we set up the fleur-de-lis in Design Make Machinist, the actual shape height of the relief was 0.35, and then we added a little bit of a gap at the top, which was 0.5. So those added together get our 0.4 value here that we're using. When it comes to the tool, we're actually going to use an 1/8" end mill. I'm just going to get rid of this 1/4" end mill here. I don't want to use two tools on this toolpath, but you can just click on select here, come over to your tools, choose your end mill, which is a 1/8" end mill for this job. And I'm going to make sure that these settings here are correct for my machine, and these look okay to me. So I'm going to go ahead and click select. Now, if I did want to edit this for this job in particular, you can just click on edit just here. So you can edit the settings for your toolpath just for this specific job. But if you did want to edit the end mill for future use consistently, you could just click on it within the select menu and change the values here as well. But I'm going to make sure that I don't have two end mills selected here. As you noticed that when I selected that end mill, it gave me another one. Make sure that you don't have two selected here because it will run both. So let's remove that from our list. We're going to use an offset strategy here, and that means that the tool is going to go from the inside and work its way out. And that way, if there are any tool marks, if we do see them, there'll be radius around the outside, and I think that'll be a nice way to treat them. Now, typically when I have something that's inside of an oval or a circle shape, or basically any roundish shape, I'll use the offset tooling for that. Now, we're not going to use any pocket allowance here. I'm not going to have any ramp plunge moves, but I will just rename the pocket with the tool size, so 0.125 end mil, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit calculate. Okay, so let's have a look at previewing our pocket. So with our pocket toolpath selected, we can click on preview selected toolpath. And there you go. And because we've got a small tool going around this, it's actually giving us quite a nice boundary around our fleur-de-lis here. That looks really, really nice. I'm quite happy with that. So let's just close this down. And now what we're going to look at is actually pocketing out our text over here. Now, like I'd mentioned before, you're going to want to choose a font that you can actually pocket out. So it's something kind of straight and beefy and not a whole lot of serif, like a fancy font. And this one here ticks all of those boxes. So that should be great when we're going to go ahead and pocket the toolpath now. So we're going to make sure that we make sure this is selected, come over to our pocket toolpath. So we need to make sure the start depth is actually 0.4 because this recess here that I'm hovering my mouse pointer over is actually 0.4 inches down. You notice that we cut that out a minute ago, so we need to account for that pocket there. So we need to start at 0.4, then I'm going to go down by a further 0.1. I've got an 1/8 inch end mil selected here, and that's what I want to use. So I'll just make sure that is selected. I am going to use an offset strategy again. I will not use any ramp plunge moves, and I won't give a pocket allowance, but I will call this one pocket 0.125 end mil text. So it's clear to me that this is the pocket for the text. Let's just hit calculate. And with our toolpath selected here, it's highlighted in blue. Got a little check mark next to it as well. We can preview that selected toolpath. There we are. I think that looks really, really nice. That looks really, really smart. Okay, so now finally we can look at now cutting out our signs. We can select our ellipse vector over here. Let's just close out our preview first. So we've got our ellipse selected, and we're going to do a profile cut this time. So just look down on our 3D view. Now, the start depth will be at 0, but I want to go the full depth of the material. And to do that, I can just type in Z and then hit equals on the keyboard, and it'll automatically populate what the thickness of your material is, which is really great. I do want to use a 1/4 inch end mil here, but I am going to edit this for this particular toolpath to change the pass depth. I'm going to change the step down here to 1/4 inch. I'm just going to hit OK. Now, in terms of machining the vectors, I'm actually going to go on the outside. Now, often if we profile outside of the line, because we've already done this pocket here between the fleur-de-lis and our ellipse that we're going to cut out, because we're going to machine outside this line here, you may find that there's some little fine pieces of wood or material that are sticking up when we're all done. So what we want to do is actually offset our tooling inwards just a little bit, so that we can make sure that that extra material is trimmed off. We don't want to offset our pocket toolpath between our fleur-de-lis and our border, because if you had done that, then part of our relief here would actually have been cut away, and we don't want to do that. So we can handle some of the extra material at this stage by using our profile tool with a bit of an offset to get rid of any potential extra material that's left over on the outside here. So to do that, we're going to make sure our machine vectors are set to outside/right, and we're going to have an allowance offset of 0.01, so nice and small there. And we are actually going to add some tabs to our toolpath, so make sure that this option is checked here. And I'm actually going to make these 1/4 inch in length and 1/4 inch in thickness, but I am going to edit the tabs a little bit. Now, because this is an oval, I'm actually going to let the software automatically place these. So I'm going to put 4 around our oval. I'm just going to go hit add tabs. Now, I'm actually quite happy with how they're currently placed, but if you did want to move these around, what you could do is just click on them and just move them around. So for example, you can move them there. Let's say you want to move this one to the side here, and you want to move this one over to this side. So you've got almost like north, south, east and west covered here. And we want the bottom there. And there you go. So you can have that option as well. But I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and click close. Don't need any ramps or anything like that. So I can go ahead and rename this to Profile Cutout with the tool that I'm using here. So 0.25 N mil. I'm just going to go ahead and click calculate. And now I'm going to preview this toolpath while it's selected. And there we are. Now, you may notice that I've made a mistake. You may notice that the material that I was speaking of earlier that we need to trim away is actually there. Now, that is a very easy mistake to make, but also a very easy one to fix as well. So let's have a look at what's actually going on here. So if we open up our profile cutter again, you'll notice that this value here for the allowance is actually a positive value. And what I actually needed to do is make it a negative value so it offsets inwards instead. So just put a minus in front of that and I'll calculate that toolpath again. Now what I'll do is I'll reset the preview and I'm going to run all our toolpaths again so we can just see what happens. There we are, it's cleaned up that edge now for us. You can see no more of that extra material left over. And I'm actually quite happy that I made that mistake because it meant that I didn't then go to the CNC machine and then find out the hard way. This is why the preview is so great and it's so powerful, because it allows you to see any potential mistakes before you actually go and cut them on the machine. So it saves you a lot of time and hassle this way. And I think our sign looks wonderful. So at this stage, we can look at saving this out. So let's come into File, Save As, and I'm in my tutorial folder location. So I'm just going to call this the Importing 3D Toolpaths. And I'm just going to make sure it is a CRV file. So I've got this ready to use in future. And I'll just go ahead and click Save. And at this stage, you could also look at now saving off your toolpath files. And to do that, I'll refer you to our toolpath saving guide, which will be in the related videos or the link below this video for you if you're watching it on YouTube. But that brings us to the end of our tutorial. I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have found some very useful tips here that you can take away and try yourself. And maybe you'd like to give this file a try yourself and make any changes to it so you can make this design very much your own. But again, we thank you very much for your time and we look forward, as always, to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much.